I've just got this in. This is just breaking news, Emma, which relates to this story. We're just hearing that the BBC has apologised to Donald Trump.
Well, the BBC apologizes to President Trump. All is forgiven. Not in my book. To me, it is laughable how obviously evil the BBC and news in general is. Case in point, look at this.
Now, a transgender woman's milk is just as good for babies as breast milk.
Laughably evil. We'll get into all this. Welcome back to the JP Reacts channel, my freedom-loving friend. This is where we help spread the light of truth and freedom because truth conquers. You know who else tries to conquer truth, actually, instead of letting truth do the conquering? The news. And the BBC is certainly near the top of the list. Seems as though it's a little bit of a propaganda outlet of the New World Order. That's fun. Globalists, they're good. So there is a little bit of a precedent that's just been set. The BBC has apologized to President Trump. The BBC, in their own words, made a mistake. And I'll show you it was not a mistake. This is just intentional. Their apology means absolutely nothing. And I think one of the purest things that evil does is try to eliminate truth. And if you look at the BBC, you'll look at cable news, it is pure evil. They're simply trying to eliminate truth and shape people's minds to see what their puppet masters want them to see. That, ladies and gentlemen, is pure evil. Make no mistake about it. Yes, they're not out there directly taking lives, which would, of course, be a more dramatic expression of evil. But nonetheless, it is evil to consistently and deliberately try to destroy truth and manipulate people's minds to not see truth. And President Trump doesn't seem to go along with it. Especially when they involve him, and boy have they ever. So I'll show you the clip that BBC released and you'll just see how laughably obvious it is. Their deceptive tactics that now in their apology they call a mistake. By the way, their apology is not an apology, even though it's cool they issued an apology, but it's meaningless because their apology translated simply said, we don't want to pay President Trump $1 billion in a court settlement. And of course, the BBC wants to save face, whatever face they have left to save. And like, we made a mistake, so we're going to issue an apology. And boy, what a clumsy mistake we made because we want to remain credible in the eyes of people. The few people that still see them as credible. That's all they're doing. They're just lying about how they lied so they can try to stay relevant, so they can more effectively express evil. So, the context of this, you've probably heard about it, but it's fascinating. We'll just go through it. The BBC released a program recently with an incredibly deceptive edit of President Trump on January 6, 2021. Ever hear of it? And the edit appears to make President Trump calling for an insurrection. So I'll show you the quick clip of the BBC's edit compared to the original actual clip. Then we'll throw the BBC under the bus a little further because they're evil, it's obvious, and they deserve to be under the bus. And they deserve to have the bus pull forward over them, pull backward, reverse, and just kind of grind them down into the nothingness that they actually are. So, first clip, the BBC's deceptive rendition of President Trump calling for an insurrection.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
Boy, that kind of does sound like he's calling for an insurrection. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to fight. Yeah, I would admit that sounds like President Trump's calling for an insurrection. Problem is, he wasn't. Those weren't his words in unison. We're going to fight. We're going to fight like hell. That was, you'll see in a second, that was recorded about an hour after his first sentence. So here's a quick clip of the original thing President Trump said. See if you can spot a difference. See if there's a difference in the meaning.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Wow, cheer on our brave congressmen and women. Cheer on. That seems a little different than we're gonna fight. Once we're gonna go there, we're gonna fight. So that second clip, that's what's called truth. The first clip, that's what's called evil. It's meant to destroy the actual truth of that second clip. As in, President Trump didn't call for an insurrection. This is the BBC. Why would they care about American politics? Well, globalists are kind of like global people, so American politics is part of the pie. It's a big part of the pie. That's maybe why the BBC cares. So let's get the breakdown a little bit more with a little more nuance, because it just makes the BBC's evil even more obvious. So much so, you have to laugh at it while you protect against it.
Because tonight the BBC is facing serious questions over its credibility after the Daily Telegraph exposed a panorama segment that heavily doctored a speech by the American president in 2021, hours before the infamous January the 6th Capitol riot. As you're about to hear, the corporation spliced together two quotes 1 hour apart to make it seem like he encouraged an insurrection.
And after this, we'll see the BBC's meaningless apology. It's great. We'll get back to the video in just a second, but first I want to tell you about something in my health practice that I absolutely never miss, and that's taking my grass-fed beef liver by Ancestral Supplements every single day. Why? Because having a slow metabolism, low energy, and mental fog are my primary enemies in life. Beef liver is considered nature's multivitamin for a reason. It gives you most of the daily vitamins and minerals that you need, like vitamin A, B12, K, and iron. And because it comes in the form of real food, beef liver, your body can absorb 85% more of that nutrition than if it came from some synthetic pill. And personally, I've known about the immense value of beef liver for a long time, but my problem was I didn't like eating liver. Didn't like the taste of it. Plus, it's a pain in the butt to cook liver. However, Ancestral Supplements solved that problem for me with their grass-fed beef liver. Now I quickly and easily get all the benefits of nature's multivitamin without the hassle of cooking, or quite frankly, the taste. I love the grass-fed beef liver because it keeps my metabolism fast, energy high, mind sharp, and my cravings for crap low. If you want to conquer low energy, bring grass-fed beef liver into your life. Go to ancestralsupplements.com/JPReacts, and for 15% off, use discount code JPReacts. Now back to the video.
They played the following clip.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
But Trump didn't, in fact, say this at all. The BBC spliced together two clips that took place 54 minutes apart. So let's go through it again.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
Now, see there, between Capitol and, that's a cut. Here's what Trump actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
It's different. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that he then said the second part of the BBC's version.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell.
That is damning stuff.
Damning stuff indeed. And of course, the BBC wants to pretend, well, we made a mistake. We never try to deceive people. Yeah, that's our sole purpose. But yeah, we never try to do that. Here's a clip of a BBC reporter pretending to be on the front lines in Ukraine under heavy Russian fire. Inconveniently, there's a Ukrainian woman out walking her dog that checks on him to see if he's okay.
Amount of incoming fire coming into this now.
Incoming
artillery fire. There are loads of civilians around. Families coming out. There's a lady there with her dog following on. This is the edge of the town that the Russians have got.
Also, they probably should have edited in some gunfire sound effects. So the lady comes up, checks on him. Are you okay? Why are you laying down? We'll get to the BBC's laughable apology in a second, but of course, this all comes out about the BBC as it relates to President Trump because there was an internal memo leaked in the BBC that said to the effect, we probably shouldn't lie this obviously. So that was leaked, and the BBC probably doesn't want you to know that they had people inside asking them to stop lying. That's rather inconvenient, but it came out, it was leaked. And two heads of the BBC had to resign in shame. And of course, that's just a ceremonial ritual of like, we got heads rolling. Look, they had to resign. So this is their fault. They're gone. Therefore, we're not tarnished because the tarnishes are no longer part of our organization. Look at those two heads of the BBC. They're gone. No, that's just a ceremonial ritual. Yeah, we sacrifice someone so that we can try to save face. So what else was leaked in the internal memo? That's a good question. Mr. Prescott raised questions about several other elements of the BBC News output. He claimed its reporting of trans issues was effectively censored by its specialist LGBT reporters who promoted a trans agenda. So in other words, they're not so much doing journalism, they're doing trans propaganda, promoting a trans agenda. I was told that time and time again that LGBTQ desk staffers would decline to cover any story raising difficult questions about the trans debate, the memo said. What? The BBC was promoting a trans agenda without true journalism covering both sides? That's hard to believe when you take a look at this clip. Once again.
Now, a transgender woman's milk is just as good for babies as breast milk.
Yeah, I would imagine milk that a man produces is just as good for babies as women's breast milk. Got it, BBC. Yeah, you don't have a consistent track record of being deceptive and evil and doing it so obviously. So yes, of course, BBC, I believe this was a one-time incident, a heavy mistake. Other troubling matters were raised. Mr. Prescott said the BBC's coverage of the 2024 U.S. election was more critical of Trump than of his opponent, Kamala Harris. Thank you, Mr. Obvious. He said the BBC published ill-researched material that suggested issues of racism when there were none, including a now-removed BBC Verified story about car insurance. I love car insurance racist scandals, by the way. There was a selection bias against sending stories up about migration and asylum seekers to BBC News app users as push notifications. Yeah, no kidding. BBC and UK, which is now a Muslim country, that's shocking to find out. There would have been a selection bias in those stories. His other criticisms include misrepresenting the percentage of Palestinian women and children who have been killed by Israel's military in Gaza, and misrepresenting the likelihood of children starving under Israel's aid blockade. So, the BBC, their apology on BBC.com. The BBC has apologized to U.S. President Trump for a Paranorma episode that spliced parts of his January 6, 2021 speech together, but rejected his demands for compensation. The corporation said that it had given the mistaken impression that President Trump had made a direct call for violent action and said it would not show the 2024 program again. Yeah, that's great. It gave the mistaken impression. Let me tell you something about editing. I've published, I'm sure, well over 1,000 videos in my time. Editing is a very deliberate process, especially when you cut out 54 minutes of footage. First sentence, cool, we're going to walk down to the Capitol. Cut out 54 minutes of footage. Then let's splice that sentence in with the first sentence. That's very deliberate. Like, editing a video, it's not throwing spaghetti at a wall. It's not abstract art. It's very deliberate. So I love the BBC. Their evil is obvious while they're trying to cover up their obvious evil, the mistaken impression. No, not for a minute would I believe that. You did that very deliberately, BBC. And we go on. We accept that our edit unintentionally created the impression, very unintentionally, that we were showing a single continuous section of speech rather than excerpts from different points in the speech, and that this gave the mistaken impression, once again, that President Trump had made a direct call for violent action, the statement said. Literally laughable. It is so laughable. This is just PR deception. There is no authenticity in this apology. So in other words, the BBC has not apologized. They simply issued a propaganda statement explaining their propaganda. And the problem is they made their original propaganda about a guy who sometimes will do something about it. President Trump said, yeah, I'm going to sue you for $1 billion for defamation. They're like, well, we don't want to pay you $1 billion. Well, we want to destroy you, but we don't want to pay you $1 billion. What do we have? President Trump gives them an ultimatum, issue a retraction, and apologize. So they do a ceremonial apology, an optical apology, not a real apology. Why isn't it real? Because it is just full of lies. Unintentional edit. Mistaken. Yeah, it's not honest. Translated, their apology says, please don't sue us, President Trump. That's all it's saying. So with that, while this is about the BBC, it is truly about cable news in general. If you ever need a reminder that it is pure evil, out to deceive and influence your mind to see the world, events, and issues a certain way, let this be your reminder. Cable news, it is not journalism. It is deception masquerading as journalism. I wish that wasn't true. However, it's unfortunately true. That's what I think about this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing you on our next video. But until then, stay free.